Click, click. The doorbell rang 3 times, urgent and cold, the kind of rhythm a gavel might keep when announcing a verdict. When I opened the door, my daughter stood there in an expensive gray dress, with a lawyer at her side and a stack of papers that flashed with embossed seals. "Mom, Noah needs his biological mother," she said, sweet voice, scanning eyes, pausing only at the framed photo of my grandson on the hall table. I felt the ground tilt, not because of the words, but because I saw what was really in her gaze. She had not come for love. She had come for the $3.1 million from the software my grandson had sold. Before I could speak, Noah's hand found mine. "Let her talk," he whispered. I swallowed my anger. Sometimes the truth grows loud when a lie is allowed to finish its performance. "My name is Iris Montgomery, 68 years old, in a small house on the edge of Springfield, Missouri, where the maples throw kind shadows across the porch in late afternoon. This story began 11 years earlier, when Laura left her little boy on my steps with a casual promise to pick him up after a few days. The bag she handed me was almost empty. Her number went dead within a week. What remained was a small child whose world rattled at the sound of a kettle whistle and who ate only dry, odorless food. When I asked, "Are you hungry?" he rocked harder and covered his ears. I had taught elementary school for decades and thought I understood children. But the night the washing machine clicked on and Noah screamed as if it had bitten him, I knew I was learning a new language that had no words. Doctors confirmed what I already suspected. Noah was on the autism spectrum with a mind bright enough to memorize a page at a glance and a sensitivity so acute that a rotated plate could turn a dining room into a danger field. A therapist named Dr. Meera Patel taught me the first principle. Safety is structure. Speak softly. Move predictably. Do not touch unless he reaches first. So I built a small world that did not shift. Every morning at 700 a.m., I poached eggs to a precise softness and cut toast into 2 triangles that never touched the edge of the plate. His blue cup always waited to the right of his fork. When the refrigerator motor started, I said, "Humming now," and when I flicked on a switch, I touched a yellow sticker and whispered, "Lights." The meltdowns did not vanish, but they loosened their grip. One winter morning, he placed his small hand against my wrist for a heartbeat and stepped away. I went to the porch and cried, not because I was sad, but because a door had opened inside a house that had only windows. We took the same route to therapy every weekday, past the creek that smelled of wet iron after rain, over the small bridge that rattled like a tin toy. If I missed the turn, Noah said, "Wrong way," in a voice that trembled like a pulled wire. I learned that safety was not just a destination. It was the exact path there. In the evenings, I read in the living room while he lined up crayons and Lego and gradients so subtle my teacher's eyes could barely detect the shift from warm red toward orange. When he finally wrote his first word at the counter in shaky pencil, he did not say it aloud. He pushed the paper toward me. E-G-G. I taped it on the refrigerator with a star magnet like a medal. It stayed there for years. Christmas Eve brought the phone call I had been waiting for and dreading. "I cannot be a mother," Laura said, voice flat with an exhaustion I did not recognize. The timer shrieked, the cookies charred, and I sat on the kitchen floor among the smoke, unsure whether I was crying for the daughter I had lost or the boy who might grow up without a mother's arms. Noah came into the doorway with his blue cup, filled it, set it beside me, and said nothing. Love is sometimes a placement rather than a sentence. That was the night I stopped waiting for calls and began waiting for Noah's sunrise. School came with its own learning curve. A principal tried to move Noah to a resource room, and I unpacked test scores and therapy notes and cited the least restrictive environment clause line by careful line. He stayed in the general classroom with noise-canceling headphones and a quiet space for transitions. When I gathered the papers at home, Noah frowned. "Wrong," he said, and then he sorted the stack faster than I could blink. By date, by type, color-coded tabs. He labeled the binder's school therapy support plan home observations and then wrote a single line on a small card. Everything makes more sense when it is in order. I kept that card on the kitchen shelf and read it each morning like a prayer. As he grew, Noah began to measure what other people named. At the grocery store, he tugged my sleeve and pointed to the receipt. 4 cents off. At a street corner, he timed the traffic cycle and noted a 2-second discrepancy between days. When a talk show host smiled on television, he tilted his head. "Her eyes are not smiling," he said. The boy who once fled from sound had learned to listen to its honesty. He did not emote. He verified. I recorded everything, scanned documents, and created folders with color labels. Dr. Patel said data helps people who are dismissed. I did not know that those careful archives would one day stand against an expensive gray dress and a lawyer's briefcase, or that the child who quietly placed a blue cup beside me on a day of burnt cookies would become the one to place a truth the court could not ignore. Noah's language found a new instrument the summer he turned 12. A pale blue glow spilling from my old computer like quiet water. I stood in the doorway and watched lines of symbols move across the screen while he sat very still, the blue cup parked at his right, like an anchor. Python, he said, when I asked steady, as if he were naming a bird he had tracked for weeks. For 3 months, the keyboard mapped a metronome to our days. At 7:00 a.m., he ate poached eggs. At 7:30 p.m., he closed the laptop. The hours between were an orchard he tended tree by tree, command by command. When he brought me a small thumb drive and said, "Try this," I plugged it in and found a program that sorted files by date and removed duplicates with a note explaining why. It felt like opening a drawer and finding every family photo already labeled in a careful hand. I sold my old sewing machine and a china set to buy him a computer that did not wheeze like an accordion, and he accepted it with the same seriousness he gave to a new set of pencils in 2nd grade. "Terms acceptable," he said. Dinner at 7:00 p.m. Lights out at 10:00 p.m. We shook on it like partners. He began scanning the world into order. Receipts, school letters, therapy plans, even the pledge I taped beside my desk. "I will not edit the past to comfort the future," became neat files with names that read like coordinates. One gray afternoon, he told me about a thing called a hash, a file's fingerprint. If even a period changes, the fingerprint changes, he explained, fingers resting over the keys as if listening for their pulse. He built chains that linked fingerprints together, so the whole strand shouted if one bead moved. An audit trail, he said. Footprints that cannot be wiped. I thought about how easily human memory smudges when pain is heavy, and felt both grateful and faintly afraid of such unbending clarity. Dr. Mira stopped by one Saturday, watched Noah present his dashboard with 3 small lights, green for intact, yellow for unverified change, red for tampered, and said softly, "You're creating a space where every memory has the right to exist." She told me not to polish our history to spare either of us. Honesty was the safest room for a boy who feared sudden sounds. Then the world lurched. Lockdowns came, mornings shrank to the radius of our kitchen. I taught Noah how to order groceries online, and he taught me how to click a link at 9:00 a.m. and appear on a screen with my hair combed. In that smaller world, his software began to look larger. Forgeries multiplied. People needed proof that a document had not been touched. One afternoon, an email arrived from a small security firm in Boston asking for a demo. Noah shared his screen. He did not pitch. He explained. A forged file differing by a single period flashed red in less than a second. A week later, they offered a trial license for $25,000. Noah said, "Correct the way, another boy might have shouted yes and wrote a precise thank you." Curiosity spread like light under a door. He answered few inquiries, only those that asked exact questions. When I worried people would use his idea without paying, he said, "Machines do not prevent theft. They show it." A lawyer named Ava Morales sat at our kitchen table at 2:00 p.m. on a windy Thursday and laid out possibilities I had never considered: patents, licensing, and outright sale. Noah kept his gaze on the paper and said, "I do not want calls when it glitches. I want quiet." Ava folded her hands. "If you sell, they'll want a non-compete for several years." Noah nodded. Acceptable. He was 16 and spoke about quiet, as if it were a mountain he planned to climb alone. Atlas Verify in Chicago bought the system for $3.1 million lump sum, creator credit preserved. When Ava called at 11:10 a.m. to say the wire had cleared, I sat down on the couch because my knees refused to hold. Noah set up a scholarship for autistic students who wanted to learn programming and wrote the guidelines in language so clean it gleamed. A local news crew arrived at 4:00 p.m., lights bright enough to make dust look like confetti. "How does it feel?" the reporter asked. "Like seeing a calculation come out right," he said, and I watched viewers fall in love with his understatement through a camera lens. The letters began. A principal from a town I had never visited. A cousin's friend who wanted to know if Noah would mentor his son. People left baked bread on the porch at 5:30 p.m. and waved from the walk without coming close. For 2 weeks, our house felt like a harbor after a decade in rough weather. I slept through the night. Noah worked at a pace that sounded like rain. I dared to think the worst was behind us. I should have remembered that paper is patient and ambition wears perfume. On a Monday at 9:15 a.m., the doorbell rang 3 sharp times, a rhythm I had already learned to fear. Laura stood there in a charcoal dress beside a man with a leather briefcase. The stack he carried rose thick enough to look inevitable. "We're here to discuss legal rights," he said, voice professional and warm, the way a hand might feel before it pushes. "Visitation logs, transfer receipts, call records, notarized signatures with red seals that glowed like warnings. 11 years rewritten into pages that insisted I had merely kept the seat warm." My fingertips went cold. I felt all the breakfast drives, IEP meetings, and silent nights collapse into a pile of paper that did not recognize them. I called Ava. She arrived by 10:40 a.m., calm eyes, scanning fast. "We can prove care," she said quietly, "but without proving forgery. They can petition for guardianship of his assets until he turns 18. That sentence cracked the air. Love had never needed a stamp. The law did. That night, our dining table turned into a field desk. I dragged out binders. Noah pulled them closer and began to relabel. Red for claims tied to Laura's story, yellow for items needing verification, green for what was indisputable. He opened his laptop and the familiar dashboard glowed to life green, yellow, red. Court is on Thursday at 9:00 a.m. Ava texted at 7:12 p.m. I read it twice and sat back as if the chair had shifted shape. Noah kept working quiet as tide. At 3:00 a.m., light still spilled under his door. I tapped once. Sleep. Almost done, he said. I did not ask, with what? Some kinds of faith are a learned discipline. I returned to bed and stared at the ceiling until the line between night and morning thinned, and the kitchen clock clicked to 6:00 a.m., steady as a heart that had trained itself not to race. The morning of the hearing, Springfield looked like it had been dusted with frost. I sat in the car, gripping a folder so hard the edges bent. Ava reviewed her notes beside me, calm as ever. In the back seat, Noah held his silver laptop on his knees, gaze steady on the courthouse steps. He had hardly spoken since dawn, just slipped the computer into his bag and said, "Everything has timestamps." Inside the courtroom was pale wood and polished silence. Laura sat across the aisle in a cream dress, her lawyer, Mr. Aldridge, arranging papers like a magician about to perform. When the judge called the case, Laura's side went first. Mr. Aldridge spoke of maternal devotion, of financial support, of a woman making amends. Each page he presented gleamed with seals and signatures. 11 years rewritten into evidence the way a storm rewrites a coastline. The judge nodded as he flipped through, murmuring, "Very thorough." My stomach dropped. When it was my turn, my voice came out thin but firm. I told them about the nights of burnt cookies and the mornings of blue cups, about IEP meetings and therapy drives, about how Noah's world had been built one quiet pattern at a time. The judge listened sympathetic, then asked, "Mrs. Montgomery, do you have a legal guardianship transfer from your daughter?" The air left my chest. "No, Your Honor. She never signed anything." He sighed softly, and the sympathy in his eyes felt worse than accusation. Ava tried to pivot, but I knew sentiment would not outweigh signatures. Then Noah stood. "Your Honor," he said, voice calm but carrying. "May I present evidence?" Ava nodded for permission. Noah walked to the front, plugged in his laptop, and the screen filled with his familiar dashboard, 3-light screen, yellow-red. "These are the documents submitted by the petitioner," he said. "I ran them through my verification system." He clicked. One by one, the icons flashed red. The room hushed. Each file was created and time-stamped within the same 24-hour period, 5 days after the public announcement of the software sale. None exist prior to that date. If they represented 11 years of records, the timestamps would vary. He showed graphs, metadata pen pressure comparisons of signatures. The handwriting differs in slope and rhythm by 27.6%. It cannot be the same writer. Laura's face blanched. Her lawyer objected, claiming Noah was not a certified expert. Noah didn't flinch. "I'm not asserting guilt," he said evenly. "I'm showing what the data shows." Then he displayed phone logs, bank statements, and calendars. My handwritten notes scanned years ago, cross-checked against public records. There were no calls or transfers from her number during the time she claims contact. Each record is independently hashed on a non-editable server. The verification link is available. The judge leaned forward, reading carefully. "Miss Morales, can you confirm this technology?" Ava nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. It's registered under his name." The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of lights. "Miss Wright," the judge said finally, "how do you explain the discrepancy?" Laura's lips trembled. "I converted old files," she stammered. "Maybe I saved the wrong dates." "Converted," he repeated. "These were newly created, not copied." His tone hardened. "You understand the difference?" Laura's eyes flicked down. "I just wanted to protect my son." The judge's gavel touched the bench, not striking yet. "By creating false evidence," Aldridge tried to interject, but the damage was done. The judge summarized calmly, citing each proof Noah had shown: the metadata, the mismatched signatures, the non-existent call records. "The court finds the petitioner's evidence falsified and her testimony unreliable," he concluded. "Full guardianship of Noah Montgomery, including financial assets, is hereby granted to Mrs. Iris Montgomery." I didn't realize I was crying until Ava pressed a tissue into my hand. Across the aisle, Laura folded inward, whispering something I couldn't hear. When the judge spoke again, his voice was softer. "Miss Wright, your actions harm the very child you claim to love. The court will refer this for review. But in light of your son's statement, sentencing will include probation and community service at an autism center." Noah closed his laptop, nodded once, and said quietly, "I just wanted the truth to be seen." The gavel fell. I felt the sound in my bones. Outside, sunlight spilled over the courthouse steps. Ava smiled. "Iris, Your grandson just taught a courtroom what honesty looks like? I looked at Noah, his silver laptop reflecting the sky. No, I said. He taught me first. That night, I made poached eggs and toast, the same diagonal cut as always. Noah checked the verification chain on his screen. Still running, he said. I smiled through tears. Then we kept the truth. A year passed after the trial, and the noise of it faded into something quieter, a rhythm almost like peace. Noah turned 17, tall now, deliberate in every movement, the kind of young man who noticed when the clock ticked off beat. The sale money sat safe under Ava's careful watch, invested and steady. But Noah never seemed interested in what people called fortune. He still lived by his rituals: breakfast at 7 a.m., coding at 9 a.m., tea at 4 p.m. One morning, as I poured coffee, he walked in with his laptop balanced on one arm and said calmly, "I'm going to start a company." I nearly dropped the spoon. "A company? You're not even old enough to register one." He met my eyes. "Ava will handle the paperwork under your name. I'll run it." I sat down, half in disbelief, half in awe. "What kind of company? Noah Software Testing," he said. "Quality assurance. We'll hire autistic people. We see patterns others skip." I couldn't speak for a moment. In a world that had spent years telling him to blend in, he was building a place where difference itself was the qualification. 3 months later, Pattern Insight Labs opened in a small red brick building downtown. 6 desks, 2 whiteboards, and warm amber lights. The first hire was a man named Jalen Ford, one of my former students, a boy I had once defended in front of a discipline board who'd been labeled disruptive. He'd grown into a quiet, sharp-eyed adult working warehouse shifts. During the interview, Noah projected a code sample on the wall. "Find the bug," he said. Within seconds, Jalen pointed to a single misplaced semicolon. "That's useless," he said. Noah nodded once. "You're hired." The office ran like a heartbeat constant, precise, never loud. No chatter, no forced small talk, just the gentle rain of keyboards and the hum of focus. Each employee had a small whiteboard marked with colors: green for calm, yellow for stress, red for overload, so everyone could work without guessing others' moods. Noah rarely raised his voice, but when he walked by, people straightened with respect. Every week, he wrote bug patterns on the big board, connecting them with colored tape into webs of logic. Watching him move among his team, I realized he had built not just a company, but a sanctuary. One afternoon, I brought butter cookies for everyone. Jalen smiled shyly. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, "do you remember what you told me 20 years ago? That different isn't broken." My throat tightened. "You remembered that I've lived by it," he said. "And now, I'm signing my first contract under your student's company." I turned away, blinking hard. Sometimes, the world folds a circle so perfectly, you can see your own kindness coming back to you. Within months, Pattern Insight Labs had clients from across the country. Their microbug detection rate was twice that of industry averages. When investors called, Noah handled the meetings himself, voice calm and deliberate. "Software doesn't fix people," he said once to a group of executives. "People fix software." They laughed politely, but I saw something flicker in their eyes, respect, maybe even wonder. On the company's first anniversary, I visited with a tray of cookies. The team gathered quietly, their smiles small but sincere. Noah lifted his blue cup in a gentle toast. "To correctness," he said. I laughed. "No celebration speech, no need," he replied. "Everything's working." He wasn't wrong. Under those amber lights, 6 people once called broken had built something whole. A few months later, I stopped by the Springfield Autism Support Center with picture books Noah had donated. The director greeted me warmly, then pointed to one of the classrooms. "She's been volunteering extra hours," she whispered. Through the doorway, I saw Laura, sitting cross-legged with a circle of children. In her hands was the very hungry caterpillar. Her voice was soft, careful waiting between sentences for the children to react. Some rocked, some clapped. None spoke. Laura smiled anyway. She looked thinner, humbled, but peaceful. "She says she wants to learn how to listen," the director said. I stood there a long moment before turning away. Forgiveness doesn't announce itself. It just arrives one morning and sits quietly beside you. I realized I no longer carried that heavy stone of anger. Laura had found her way back to something gentle, even if through consequence. Maybe that was grace in disguise. Tuesday evenings became our small tradition. I'd bring dinner to Noah's apartment, curry chicken or eggs and toast. The blue cup, now nicked along its rim, still sat beside his keyboard. We ate in silence, the air filled with soft sounds, the clink of a spoon, the hum of the fan, the quiet pulse of contentment. One evening, Noah set his spoon down and looked at me. "You missed a lot," he said simply. "Friends travel freedom?" I smiled, resting a hand on the back of his chair. "I missed them so I could keep you. That was my freedom." He said nothing, but his eyes softened in that way they did when words were unnecessary. When I left that night, the street was golden, under the lamps, maple leaves trembling. At the red light, my phone buzzed. Thank you. Just 2 words. I whispered into the quiet car. Forgiveness is a slow verb, but it knows the way home. I thought of Laura reading to children of Noah building a company where silence meant focus, not shame, and of the long years that had led us here. We all find order differently through law, through code, through the steady act of staying. I once believed love was proven in what we said. Now I know it lives in what we keep, what we protect, what we record faithfully, even when no one is watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what truth have you chosen to protect even when it cost you peace? Sometimes one person's story is another's strength.